Professor Zhang Weiwei, it is great to have you back for a second time on the show. Professor at Fudan University, author of many books, and a huge voice in helping Westerners, Americans, and English language speakers understand China. So I don't want to waste so much of your time because we have a lot to cover. I wanted to begin on the military front. We just engaged in a conversation here at the Shanghai Institute of American Studies about China and U.S. relations. And one of the big things I'm noticing is that whether it's Pakistan and India, the Western media is having a hard time understanding how Chinese jets, the J-10C, has been so effective for Pakistan. And the Indo-Pacific Command has also been reporting to the Western mainstream media almost daily now. No one is paying attention that China's military is becoming much more competitive, and that this deterrence that the United States needs to engage with over Taiwan is becoming more critical. Could you talk about China's military power? Where does it fit in the larger sense of China's rise?
You know, Chinese approach is always very modest. And in fact, this J-10 jets used by Pakistani Air Force is already not most advanced, maybe 1 decade behind the jets used by Chinese military force now. And that's for export and redesigned version, but it's still effective. And what's really amazing about it is the Chinese approach to modern warfare. This is maybe transformative. It's called the systemic and integrated approach. If you look at this air conflict between Pakistan and India, it's AWACS Chinese style and Jet-10 jets, and then this missiles, PL-15. So they are linked with this data chain. So as soon as discovered, it's called the discovery, jamming, and attack. It's all in one system and proved to be very powerful. In fact, this is always the Chinese model. Whatever we discuss in the Chinese model development, model of economic reform, it's always we emphasize systemic approach and integrated approach. If you compare China's trade war with the United States, the Donald Trump's calculation of tariff, whatever, from Chinese point of view, it's very naive. We think in terms of surplus, deficit, and revenue from companies in other countries, etc. This is a very comprehensive approach, systemic approach. So I think, it's good in a way that the outside world, especially those who are somehow, trigger happy in the West, especially in the United States, will become more aware of the powerful defense capability China possesses. And I say this openly to outside world. I said Chinese culture is about, modesty and respecting faith of others. In other words, we don't humiliate others in public. Even for this so-called victory on the part of Pakistani and Chinese weaponry. But Chinese official media does not discuss this. This is entirely in the Chinese social media. It's different. In other words, the official policy still keep a low profile, don't talk too much about this. At the same time, it's necessary to realize, as I said, we still talk about the United States as a superpower. But I said, if for all kinds of reasons, US prefers to provoke a conflict in South China Sea or over Taiwan Strait, God forbid, we hope it will never happen. But most probably next day, in the eyes of the international community, the United States may no longer be viewed as a superpower. In other words, same kind of failures U.S. military will suffer. In this sense, U.S. Secretary of Defense is, in a way, honest. We said from his knowledge, US-10 Alpha K may sink by the Chinese supersonic missile system within 20 minutes. I said maybe within 1 to 3 hours, but he said within 20 minutes. Maybe he had better information than
Well, I wanted to follow up then because earlier in Trump's administration, during the beginning of the trade war, China's foreign ministry came out very strong and said China is ready to fight what China's foreign ministry spokesperson said, any type of war, trade war, any kind of war. What is the perspective of the Chinese people of China when a statement like this is made? Because in the West, in the United States, there was a bit of a shock, especially to those who have been in the mainstream media talking about China in a very, I would say, schizophrenic way, right? All powerful sometimes and collapsing on the other.
Maybe at a certain point of time, it's necessary to, have this kind of straight talk. Otherwise, there could be misunderstanding. And Chairman Mao famously said we should talk in a language understandable by the imperialists. So that could be a Chinese approach at certain point of time is necessary. And even with this tariff war, and China also said, we can fight. If you want to fight this kind of war, we'll fight to the very end of it. But we're also saying that our door is open for negotiations. So now China and the United States signed a deal in Geneva.
Do you find that it will be more and more necessary as U.S.-China relations continue to take shape from now into the future to be more straightforward, like China's foreign ministry has been of late? Because I think in the United States, one of the big problems with perception is that some believe that China does not stand up for itself enough, that it is not standing up to the U.S. to a sufficient degree, while others believe that, of course, China is this major aggressor that is essentially looking to supplant U.S. dominance with its own kind of dominance. What's your thoughts?
And from my, knowledge of the American culture, I think this culture respects the real strengths. If you look at Donald Trump's personality, he respects strong country and strong leaders. So it's not that bad for Chinese today to talk frankly with their American counterparts to reduce as much as possible any misunderstanding. And on my part, I'm always be very frank in talking about Chinese model, Chinese approach. As I just explained, I wrote back in the year 2006 for an article for New York Times International Edition. I said, in the global south, Chinese model will be far more attractive than the American model. That was so many years ago. I think it's also the way most Americans live. They prefer candid talk rather than roundabout talk. And this is for better communication. This is also something we learned from the United States.
Well, speaking of candid talk, Donald Trump, President of the United States now, in his second term, he talks about the U.S. and is now in a period of a rising golden age, and that China, and essentially most other countries in the world, but particularly China, is on the opposite track. During the tariff, we call it frenzy
Yeah.
He stated quite clearly that it's China's economy that is collapsing because of the tariffs. Talk about the reality of this from the Chinese perspective, because I know you've written so much on not only China's rise, but how it compares to where the United States is going.
One disadvantage for many American politicians, now including Donald Trump, is their somehow misinformation of China. And of course, that has to do with, for so many decades, this American mainstream media have such a distorted picture of China. And for us, as scholars of international relations and big power relations, sometimes, as I said, we try to explain China, real China to you once, twice, 3 times. Then we are fed up. So we live in darkness. We don't care. If you look at this American media coverage of China, even today, it's always, real estate bubble and unemployment, youth unemployment, and government debts. All these problems are being solved. It's so outlandish. So I think it's, you have to be on the spot, come to China, and do field investigations, as we do in China. And we just came back from EU, China's largest, they call it small commodity market, but actually it's also big commodities. I checked with the owner of many shops and also the manager of this city, this complex. He said that in our EU, this whole huge blocks of these markets, maximum 5% enterprises suffer from this trade tariff. 95%, no impact whatsoever. Even of this 5%, because this trade war tariff was started, since 7 years ago. So they have already diversified. So they suffer a bit from the United States, but also they expanded in Southeast Asia, in Russia. So the overall mood is very positive. This is very different from 7 years ago when the trade war just started. Today it's I call it 上下一起, both the up and lower, grassroots and top leadership, very much unified. They think very clearly the United States is on the losing side of this. As we said 8 years ago, yes, now depends on China economically more than China depends on the United States. And now this view is roughly the mainstream view in China today.
To your earlier point, you mentioned how China is portrayed in Western mainstream media, and it's on all fronts. China is viewed as collapsing economically, that it will never catch up to the United States. That's actually a new trend. And militarily, that the U.S. needs to deter war with China, but China's military is just much weaker than the United States. And then on and on and on, China's perception around the world oftentimes will be portrayed as declining. But you've written about these kind of pillars of global power that are so important to judge where a particular social system, or as you call it, China, civilizational state, where they are. Could you talk about these pillars, and what is your assessment of the direction that the United States and China are going in?
In fact, I remember, Mr. Borrelli, who was the high foreign policy representative of the EU up to last year. He said something 1.5 years ago, but it's well said. He said that today everyone knows in the global south, everyone knows that economically, technologically, militarily, and ideologically, the Western whatever they have now, Global South has alternatives to replace the West, whatever they have in these four areas, these four domains. So I myself consider these four areas, economic, technological, military, ideological, are the four pillars sustaining Western hegemony or the US hegemony over the world. When we see this unipolarity is shifting fast towards multipolarity, which is already reality multipolarity, it also means these four pillars of the Western predominance have been shaken. In other words, if we can even just look at this tariff war, it reflects in all these four areas. Economically, US depends more on China, as many American supermarket chain realize without continued imports from China, shelves will become empty soon. And technologically, if you look at Huawei and DeepSeek, which are so much advanced in the cutting edge of the international new tech revolution. And we were in Huawei just 2 days ago, and they are thinking so way advanced and forward-looking. And I was thinking of not United States example, German example. Germans produced this so-called German Industry 4.0, I think 10 years ago. And China was inspired by that German plan, and they initiate this Made in China 2025. Now it's completed. And German Industry 4.0 failed completely. One major reason is they were under pressure from the United States. They're not allowed to use Huawei's 5G products. So without 5G, you cannot have intelligent economy. So militarily as well, I quoted just now the Hex's observation. Maybe China can sink all US aircraft carriers. Ideologically, when China put forward this idea of discussing together, building together, benefit together, both BRI initiative, it's an ideology. It's about equality, mutual benefit, that focus on people's livelihood. That's one reason why BRI has been so much well received abroad. By the end of last year or the year before, already about 150 countries joined in, and over 5,000 projects, $1 trillion and more dollars invested. So it's changing. In other words, today it's already different. It's a multipolarity. But what we need today is not only multipolarity or multipolar world, but also multipolar order. This is something still in the making, and we should work together. Hopefully, the United States will join in, but it's not easy. Europe will join in, and Global South are happy about this. Yeah.
In maybe the 1 to 2 minutes that I have you left, do you believe that the United States and China are closer to war now or farther away now than with the advent of the transition from Biden to Trump?
From my observation, actually, U.S. military is far more cautious vis-a-vis China. It's the U.S. politicians, congressmen, they are very arrogant. And so in the end, I think the United States has a saying, if we can't beat them, we join them. I hope that they will come for United States. Thank you.
Yes, Professor Zhang Weiwei, it was great to be with you today. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you.